So, you wanna try to begin writing a book or some kind of story, but you just don't know how. Yeah, all beginnings are hard. Hello and welcome, my beginning books, Leafs. So, how would you go about to just start writing? Yeah, it might sound easy because you just take your document, your physical book if you want to write it physically via pen and paper. Choose your method. The method itself doesn't really matter, but yeah, then you sit there and you have your story in your head. But what is the first word? What is the first sentence? It's not that easy. I know from experience writing a lot of things. Even though I never released something, which I should desperately change, I guess. But let's have a look at what I think are some very good beginnings for your story. Starting with number 1, of course. Why would you start with number 2? Method 1, the look back. So basically, this way to begin your book really depends on what your book will be about. Now, I usually write fantasy stuff, so I gotta go from that perspective. It might not work if you write something like romance or whatever, but okay. So let's do a setting that's you have your characters and they need to go on a journey or something. All good, you have that set in your mind. But also, you have some kind of legend, of some legendary hero or group of heroes. Something along those lines. It doesn't really matter what exactly, just there is a legend, or maybe it's not even a legend, but actual history that is known to have happened. Now the problem when starting a book is that you need to hook the reader immediately, basically. The first pages need to be like, yes, I want to go further into it. And starting with just the main characters set up, describing them, describing the scenery, all that stuff, is a thing you should do, but for the first page, not the best thing to get somebody hooked. Now, if you start with a look back, or a flashback if you want, that problem can be solved that way. Because you can go straight up to the final battle of said legendary hero or group of heroes or whatever, and without needing too many descriptions of what things look like and stuff, you can describe that battle, then can excite the reader into like, oh, this is how the battles will be in this fantasy Lord of the Rings style or whatever novel I'm just reading. This is exciting. I want to know. I want to see more of these battles. I want to know the characters too, of course, but yeah, I get some action here already. This is nice. I'm hooked. And that's the feeling you want to create after all, right? And, well, the legendary hero, just a short description is enough. You can describe him more along the lines of the rest of the book. But in the beginning, you don't need a very set description for him. Other than for your main character or your main characters, which, yeah, they need a bit more setup because we go along with them throughout all of your book, or even books if there are several, so yeah, there's that. But starting with that flashback to the past, to that battle, which you can even leave open. You don't even have to finish this battle. It can just end like, for example, you say, and then the hero brandished his sword and swung it at the villain. Chapter end. Now you might think, well, okay, we have that, but then in chapter 2, isn't it just the same beginning as before? I need to describe things and everything. Yes, it is. However, there is a key difference here. Because when you do it in chapter 2, or let's call it chapter 1 and the other stuff the prologue, that fits better. then the reader is already into the book and conceives that information much differently. You already have him. You already made him turn the pages, several ones. Now, if things start that aren't as action heavy or drawing in fully, is that even a word? That is fine. You have stuff like that all over your book. It can't be all action and battles. But specifically for fantasy, people want to see, well, the fantasy stuff, the magic, if there is magic in your book, of course. The sword fighting, all these cool things. They want to see that, of course. And if it just begins with, okay, here's your main character, he has brown hair and wears a tunic. Of course, you shouldn't write it like that. That was awful, but you know, if you start with all these descriptions that are way too necessary to skip, in my opinion, then you also, I don't know, the start is too slow. But with a prologue like that, yeah, that fixes that. Bringing us into the next method, which kinda similar. Method 2. The look forward. So, what you do with this is basically writing a prologue that looks into the future. Maybe even at the final battle of your book. Now you might think, wait, but wouldn't that just be giving away everything? That's the tricky part in it. You need to give enough details to make the reader inclined to find out, wait, how did we get here? Why is this happening? And then talking about the villain, maybe you shouldn't know, or the reader shouldn't know, who the villain is. And you could go something like, how about they reach the castle of the enemy leader? And they go through the castle, have some battles there, and then they open a door. And they couldn't believe who sat on the throne there. Cut. Now it's like, oh wait, who is that? The reader already knows, even if they don't actively know it, they know it in the back of their heads, that apparently it is someone those characters know. Your heroes, your protagonists. They know that character, and it's somebody they didn't expect to see there leading the evil armies. Who is that? Now the reader will be puzzled on that and desperately wants to find out. Only one way to find out, right? Read the rest of the book. Easy as that. And I think that method works. Personally, I do not like it all that much. Because at one point, and that's the big problem, at least I have, you might think differently with that, is that at one point you gotta read through this chapter again, basically. It doesn't need to be word for word, but the scenery, the stuff that happens, it's the same as in the prologue. Because at one point in the journey, they will reach that point. Could you just skip that point? Yes, but having that skip, even if you technically read that part in the beginning, a skip in the story is weird. Like, if you do a time skip or anything, that is of course fine, but yeah, just skipping over this because we had it as a prologue, finicky. That can be not working that well. Nonetheless, the method will get your reader hooked, and I think if you can pull it off correct so that when you read it again it doesn't become like a boring chapter, I think you have a solid method going on, but it's a bit harder to write, honestly. Method 3. Everybody has a childhood. Probably. So, this is a mixture of a classical beginning of you see your heroes start out, have them be described and things, but watered down a bit. Basically, you have something happen in their childhood. Like, yeah, maybe they go on a little adventure with their friends. That's just a harmless adventure, like exploring a cave in the nearby village they live. Something like that. That depends on your story, of course, if this fits. But the way you can do that, and that's the beauty of it, you can describe the character's basic traits, like their hair colors and things, without going into too much detail, because after their childhood chapter, which is like the prologue or chapter 1, maybe even the first 2 chapters, you have the time skip ahead to, well, basically what is the present of your book, the now, where the rest of the story will be set in. And there you can add to the description. Their hair color probably hasn't changed. And if it has changed after this time skip, that's a cool thing to mention. That also will get the reader intrigued. And yeah, you can go low on the descriptions, have basic descriptions without overloading it. And then in chapter 2 or 3, or depending on how you do it, chapter 1, then you can add to those descriptions on top of that. Basically meaning that while you still have the whole of the description of the characters, you only use part of that for the child versions, because they still grow, change their clothing and stuff, but they don't change traits like skin color, hair color, eye color, stuff like that. Depending on how detailed you want to describe them, of course. And then the rest can be described in their adult or teen lives, depending on how old they will be. So you have this description, but cut in halves, basically. And that's a very beautiful way to do it. Of course, every method comes with a problem, because maybe things just don't make sense for the story you have in mind to show their childhoods. Maybe they never had a childhood. Maybe they are created beings or something. In that case, well, you could technically go about their creation or something, but, you know, I don't know if that would be that interesting if you describe how somebody builds a robot specifically, if they're like a robot or God creates something. Like, you can't fill a whole prologue with that, obviously. Yeah, all these methods in the end depend on the story you want to tell. But, well, that's the 3 methods I thought up. So, tell me, will you use one of those methods? Have you already used one of those methods? I want to see the comments in the description. Also, like and subscribe if you like this and want more content like this. Show me by the liking and commenting, definitely. And check out all the links down in the description, and we'll see each other next time. Bye. What did I do there and why did I do that? Also, there's a video.